It didn't start with a collapse. There were no emergency press conferences or dramatic factory closures broadcast live on the evening news. Instead, America's auto industry began changing quietly, line by line on balance sheets, shift by shift on factory floors, and paycheck by paycheck in towns built around manufacturing. By the time the numbers became impossible to ignore, the damage was already spreading. In just 1 year, tens of thousands of auto-related jobs disappeared across the United States. Assembly lines slowed, entire shifts vanished, and behind every shuttered line was a chain reaction that extended far beyond the factory gates into parts suppliers, logistics firms, diners near industrial parks, and local school districts funded by manufacturing taxes. This wasn't a temporary dip or a seasonal correction, it was something deeper. At the center of it all sits a policy choice that was supposed to protect American industry. Tariffs, designed to encourage domestic production and punish offshoring, they instead collided with a modern auto system built on global integration and just-in-time logistics. What followed wasn't resilience, it was strain. Costs surged, planning horizons collapsed, and automakers were forced to make decisions faster than their supply chains could adapt. Consumers felt the effects soon after. New car prices climbed even as demand weakened. Financing costs stacked on top of higher stickers. The used car market, once a safety valve for affordability, tightened dramatically, leaving buyers with fewer choices and older vehicles. At the same time, investment capital began moving, not disappearing, but relocating, often just across the border. This isn't a story about one company failing or one country winning. It's a story about a regional industry being reorganized under pressure. Some automakers are absorbing massive losses to buy time. Others are retreating from entire segments. And a few are betting billions that the future of North American auto manufacturing will look very different from its past. To understand where this is heading, we have to start at the beginning, on the factory floor, where the first cracks appeared long before most buyers noticed anything was wrong. Real quick, if you're into videos that cut through the noise and break things down clearly, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people find this. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Also, drop a comment and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your take. Now onto the video. The first warning sign didn't come from dealerships or earnings calls. It came from employment data. In 2025 alone, more than 42,000 auto-related factory jobs vanished across the United States, and that figure only captures direct employment. When assembly plants reduce output or shut down shifts, the impact multiplies. Suppliers cut orders, trucking routes disappear, maintenance contracts are cancelled. Entire local economies feel the contraction almost immediately. What made this wave of job losses especially damaging was how fast it spread. Modern auto manufacturing depends on a tightly synchronized system where parts arrive just hours before installation. Tariffs on vehicles, steel, aluminum, and critical components disrupted that rhythm overnight. Costs rose instantly, but re-engineering supply chains takes years. Faced with higher input prices and uncertainty about future policy, companies responded the only way they could in the short term by slowing production. In states like Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and parts of the South, plants reduced shifts rather than shutting down outright. On paper, that looks less severe. In reality, it's often worse. Workers lose overtime, then regular hours, then benefits. Temporary layoffs stretch into permanent exits. Skilled labor leaves the industry altogether, making future recovery harder. The damage doesn't stop at employment. Towns built around a single major plant rely on manufacturing wages to support small businesses and public services. When those wages shrink, restaurant traffic drops, property values stagnate, school funding tightens, the economic stress becomes systemic. Crucially, these losses happened before consumers saw meaningful price increases. That sequence matters. It shows tariffs didn't first hit demand, they hit production. Automakers were absorbing costs quietly, hoping policy would stabilize. When it didn't, they pulled back, and once production slowed, the consequences became unavoidable. Those early job losses weren't an isolated adjustment. They were the clearest signal that the structure of North American auto manufacturing was under pressure, and that the next phase of the crisis would reach far beyond factory gates. Once production slowed, the impact moved quickly from factory floors to showroom floors. For consumers, the change wasn't dramatic at first. There were no sudden price jumps overnight. Instead, affordability began slipping quietly, month by month, as higher costs worked their way through the system. Tariffs added pressure at multiple points simultaneously. Imported vehicles, foreign components inside US-built cars, and raw materials like steel and aluminum Few modern vehicles are insulated from all three. Automakers initially tried to shield buyers. Many absorbed tariff costs rather than passing them on directly, fearing that higher sticker prices would stall demand in an already fragile market. But this strategy had limits. As financing rates remained elevated, even small price increases pushed monthly payments out of reach for many households. A vehicle that was marginally affordable before tariffs suddenly wasn't. The used car market, long considered a fallback for cost-conscious buyers, offered little relief. Fleet operators held onto vehicles longer, reducing the supply of late-model trade-ins. Lease returns slowed. Rental companies delayed turnover. As a result, vehicles that once filled the $28,000 range, ideal for compact SUVs and family crossovers, became scarce. Buyers were forced into older models with higher mileage and fewer safety features, often at prices that made little sense compared to their age. This squeeze created a hidden risk. Older vehicles are statistically less safe and less efficient. As households stretch ownership cycles, emissions goals become harder to meet, and accident risks rise. What started as a trade policy issue quietly turned into a public safety and affordability problem. Analysts warn this dynamic won't correct quickly. Even if tariffs ease, supply chains can't snap back instantly. Production planning, supplier contracts, and component sourcing operate on multi-year timelines. The affordability gap now facing consumers isn't a temporary spike. It's the result of structural disruption that will take time to unwind. And as buyers struggle, automakers are being forced to ask a more fundamental question. If costs can't be controlled where they build today, where should they build tomorrow? As pressure mounted, automakers didn't retreat from North America. They reallocated within it. Capital didn't disappear. It moved, and that movement is quietly reshaping the map of where vehicles are built, where batteries are sourced, and where future jobs will land. The era of assuming production would naturally default to US soil is over. Now, location is a strategic calculation driven by policy stability, incentives, and access to materials. Canada has emerged as one of the biggest beneficiaries of this shift. Federal and provincial governments moved aggressively to attract EV and battery investments, offering clear long-term frameworks, subsidies, and streamlined permitting. Ontario and Quebec in particular positioned themselves as hubs for critical minerals, gigafactories, and supplier parks tied into US markets through USMCA rules. For automakers, the appeal is straightforward: predictable policy and easier access to tariff-compliant trade. This doesn't mean US production is collapsing. Instead, it's being forced to compete harder. Companies are weighing whether expanding a plant in Michigan or Ohio makes sense when similar investments north of the border come with fewer regulatory unknowns and lower trade friction. For executives planning decade-long projects, certainty often matters more than short-term cost. This redrawing of the map isn't ideological, it's pragmatic. Automakers aren't choosing sides, they're choosing resilience. That's why the phrase "build where you sell" has shifted from a slogan to a survival strategy. The more localized a supply chain becomes, the less exposed it is to sudden policy shifts. But localization isn't cheap or fast. It requires new suppliers, retrained workers, and redesigned platforms. That puts enormous strain on companies with large legacy footprints. And nowhere is that strain more visible than at the top of the industry, where even the most disciplined manufacturers are feeling the weight of this transition. For decades, Toyota and Honda were viewed as models of operational stability. Conservative planning, disciplined cost control, and long-term thinking insulated them from many industry shocks. That reputation is now being tested. Tariffs hit these companies not because they lacked US manufacturing, but because modern vehicles rely on deeply integrated global supply chains that can't be localized overnight. Toyota warned that tariffs could erase nearly $10 billion from its operating income, forcing sharp downward revisions to profit forecasts. In a rare moment of candor, executives acknowledged that visibility had deteriorated, especially in North America, where results swung from profit to loss. Even after a provisional trade adjustment reduced tariff rates, costs remained dramatically higher than pre-tariff levels. Toyota's response has been to double down on its "build where we sell" philosophy. More than half of its US sales already come from American plants, and investments in batteries and components are accelerating. Rather than raising list prices immediately, Toyota absorbed losses to maintain dealer relationships and protect market share. That approach buys goodwill, but it burns cash. Honda faces similar challenges. While it has shifted production of popular models like the CR-V and Civic hybrids to North America, many high-value components still come from abroad. Electronics, drivetrains, and specialized parts continue to trigger duties. limiting how much localization can offset tariffs in the short term. For both companies, the dilemma is clear: raise prices and risk demand erosion, or absorb losses and strain financial performance. Neither option is sustainable indefinitely. The transition they've begun will take years, not quarters, and during that time, even the strongest players remain exposed. And if this is the position industry leaders find themselves in, the situation becomes far more precarious for those without the same scale or financial cushion. While industry giants absorb losses to buy time, smaller Japanese automakers are facing a much narrower set of options. For brands like Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, and Mitsubishi, tariffs don't just erode margins, they threaten long-term positioning in the US market. Unlike Toyota or Honda, these companies lack the scale, cash reserves, or manufacturing footprint to pivot quickly without significant consequences. Nissan's situation illustrates the pressure. The company halted forward guidance after warning that tariff exposure would cost billions. Although Nissan operates US plants in Tennessee and Mississippi, its reliance on imported components and Mexico-built models complicates compliance. To cope, Nissan leaned heavily on discounts for US-built vehicles like the Rogue and Pathfinder, while quietly pausing or deprioritizing certain Mexico-sourced crossovers. In effect, trade policy, not consumer demand, began dictating which products reach showrooms. Subaru faces an even sharper challenge. With a disproportionately high dependence on the US market and limited global production diversity, it chose to raise prices across much of its lineup. Analysts warn that unless Subaru rapidly expands US production and localizes components still sourced from Japan, tariff costs could climb into the billions. Price hikes, however, risk damaging the brand's reputation for value and reliability. Mazda's problem is structural. Exports from Mexico to the US reportedly collapsed, forcing the company to lean more heavily on its joint Alabama plant with Toyota. To protect thin margins, incentives shrank while prices edged upward, an unpopular combination for buyers. Mitsubishi faces the steepest uphill climb. With minimal US manufacturing capacity, its value proposition becomes fragile as prices rise. Industry observers increasingly point to consolidation, platform sharing, or strategic retreat from certain segments as realistic survival paths. These brands aren't failing, they're being cornered. And while some are retreating defensively, one automaker group has chosen a far more aggressive strategy. While others scramble to adapt, Hyundai-Kia has gone on the offensive. Rather than absorbing tariffs quietly or trimming product lines, the group unveiled one of the most ambitious localization plans in the industry. By 2030, more than 80% of Hyundai-Kia vehicles sold in the United States are expected to be built domestically, anchored by a massive manufacturing complex in Georgia, targeting up to 500,000 units annually by 2028. Hyundai's leadership has made it clear that the best defense against tariffs is to eliminate exposure altogether. Local steel, local assembly, and local battery production form the backbone of that strategy. The company reset profit expectations, acknowledging near-term pain in exchange for long-term resilience. The costs are substantial. Margin targets were trimmed, tariff impacts intensified in the short term, and operational friction surfaced when Korean specialists tasked with commissioning battery lines in Georgia were detained during an immigration enforcement action. An incident highlighting how trade policy, labor mobility, and industrial execution now collide. Hyundai has since pushed for smoother cross-border travel rules for technical workers, recognizing that localization still depends on global expertise. Product strategy is evolving alongside production. Hyundai and Kia are expanding hybrid offerings, planning extended-range EVs for the latter part of the decade, and preparing a North American pickup before 2030. Genesis, the group's luxury arm, is also benefiting from expanded US capacity. The gamble is clear. If tariffs persist, Hyundai-Kia's early investment could secure pricing stability and market share, while rivals struggle. But if policy shifts, the scale of these investments could weigh heavily. Either way, the group has reshaped the competitive landscape, and its ripple effects are already being felt beyond corporate balance sheets. As automakers adjust strategies, consumers are absorbing the consequences. Tariff costs reach buyers through three main channels: duties on imported vehicles, tariffs on foreign parts embedded in US-built cars, and higher prices for raw materials like steel and aluminum. Few models qualify for exemptions without costly redesigns, forcing companies to make uncomfortable trade-offs. Some raised sticker prices, others trimmed features, reduced incentives, or leaned on dealer financing to mask increases. In many cases, buyers paid more while receiving less. The effects are especially visible in the used market, where higher new car prices pushed demand downward into an already constrained supply. Trade-ins fell, fleet turnover slowed, and clean late-model vehicles became scarce. For households, the impact is tangible. Buyers once shopping for affordable compact SUVs now face older vehicles with higher mileage and fewer safety upgrades. This shift carries long-term implications for road safety, emissions, and family budgets, costs that rarely appear in policy debates but accumulate over time. Stable policy frameworks, investment incentives, and access to critical minerals have drawn gigafactories and supplier parks northward. Each project in Ontario or Quebec strengthens Canada's position in the North American auto ecosystem. With USMCA rules maintaining cross-border access, the country offers a balance of localization and trade flexibility that appeals to risk-averse investors. The phrase "build where you sell" has evolved into a guiding principle for survival. Supply chains are becoming more regional, more insulated, and more capital-intensive. And as families feel the squeeze and companies redraw their maps, one question looms over the entire industry. What does this transformation ultimately mean for the future of American auto manufacturing? What's unfolding across North America is often framed as a crisis, but that framing misses the deeper truth. This isn't the sudden collapse of American auto manufacturing, nor is it a simple story of foreign brands abandoning the US. Instead, it's a high-speed restructuring of an industry that was built for one economic reality and is now being forced to operate in another. Tariffs didn't destroy the auto sector on their own. What they did was expose how tightly wound modern manufacturing has become and how little margin for error exists when policy shifts faster than supply chains can adapt. Jobs disappeared first, long before consumers noticed price changes. Affordability eroded next, not because demand surged, but because production slowed and costs stacked up. Then capital began moving, quietly but decisively, toward regions offering stability, predictability, and long-term planning horizons. The responses have been telling. Toyota and Honda are absorbing billions to preserve market share, while racing to localize deeper than ever before. Nissan, Subaru, Mazda, and Mitsubishi are being squeezed into difficult decisions: raise prices, form alliances, or retreat from certain segments altogether. Hyundai-Kia has placed one of the boldest bets the industry has seen, wagering that massive US localization will outlast political uncertainty and deliver long-term dominance. For consumers, the near-term outlook remains uncomfortable. Higher prices, fewer choices, and an aging vehicle fleet are likely to persist until supply chains stabilize and financing conditions ease. For workers, opportunity will follow investment, but not always where it once did. The next wave of jobs won't automatically land in legacy auto towns. They'll go where companies can rebuild supply networks fastest and at scale, and that's where the biggest shift may lie. North America's auto heartland is no longer defined by history alone. It's being reshaped by speed, policy clarity, and capital deployment. Michigan, Georgia, Ontario, and Quebec are no longer competing indirectly. They're part of the same strategic chessboard. The industry now stands on a tightrope. If policy volatility continues, localization will accelerate and the map will keep changing. If conditions stabilize, today's investments will still shape the market for decades. Either way, the era of assuming where cars are built, how much they cost, and who benefits most is over. The transformation is already underway, and the next few years will decide who emerges stronger and who struggles to keep up. Once again, thanks for watching this video. If you got something out of this, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. And hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Agree, disagree, or something in between. I'd love to hear it.